Welcome back, everybody, to the Morning Update Show. And joining me right now is my good friend and community, just grow up with her and love her so much, Miss Baionne Coleman with the Global Majority Consortium. Welcome so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I mean, you are really doing some amazing things with the Global Majority Consortium, and there's some things our audience needs to be aware of. Let's start off with, what is the Global Majority Consortium?
Yeah, so the pandemic did some good things as well, right? So my husband and I have been talking about doing this work for a really long time, and the pandemic gave us the opportunity to really buckle down and make it happen. So we have a nonprofit. We also have a consulting arm of it as well. But the Global Majority Consortium is focused on closing the opportunity and the wealth gap. We are very specific in Washington State. We're not looking to go to Georgia or anywhere else. What we hope to do is to be able to train other people how to do this in their own backyards, and really tamper down that idea of colonialism, where we need to go and conquer all other spaces. We need to continue to do, each one teach one. So we need to teach other folks how to do this in their backyard so that they can actually change what the context of their communities looks like.
I love the ideas of these kind of model nonprofits setting up. I know Africatown has that same kind of vibe, right? Where it's no, even if it's an Africatown in Georgia, it's them doing it and them being able to benefit or learn from all of the lessons that Africatown is doing here. So I love that you guys take that in and bring it to heart. Plus, we need it here in Washington State. What are some of the ways that you guys are doing this work?
So we have multiple different arms of it. One of our most recent projects has been with our entrepreneurship arm. And what we did is we partnered with an organization called Pillar, who is funneling over $5 million into the Rainier Valley explicitly. We supported them with actually creating their pilot process. So we did the interviews, we showed them how, this work needs to be done, gave them the context of this work, et cetera. And then we were able to choose, we got 30 businesses out of the 107 that we actually gathered, mostly Black and Indigenous businesses. And then what we did is we put them up for recommendation. So we can't say what businesses yet because they haven't said it yet, but the lowest amount that one of the businesses got was $25,000, with the highest being $75,000.
This is a real game changer, Baionne. I mean, we talk about how much Black and Indigenous businesses from people from the global majority have been hit hard with COVID. So you're talking about $25,000 to $75,000 hitting these businesses. That's a huge marker. What are some of the things that we need to be mindful of? Because I know you're also here to kind of educate us as we think about some of these opportunities in the legislature, right?
Yeah, so one of the other arms that Global Majority Consortium does is our leader and our teacher incubators, and we do community universities, et cetera. What folks don't really recognize is what schools actually do within community when they're actually collaborative communities. And that's really important in the context of charters, because charters are the opportunity for community to actually open up and build with autonomy based off of what community needs in those spaces. A lot of folks aren't looking at those as actual ecosystems. And so what's important is to understand that education is a precursor for success. And it's not just for scholar minds, but when we actually talk about communities, and when we talk about businesses, and when we talk about mental health, right? What we do in a school begins to shape what that individual looks like within their community. So when we're looking at things for 18 to 24, year olds being shot and killed, that stems back to the education that they were actually getting. It stems back to teachers looking like them, pouring into them and giving them a space to be confident, and also giving them a space where racism is not at high levels because you have a leadership that looks like you. And so you don't have to look over your shoulder all the time and be concerned that someone's going to just say something crazy to you just based off of the sole aspect your skin is, that you have melanin, right? So when we think about that, education is an ecosystem. Money comes in from public dollars, and that money goes back out, and it has to go back out somewhere. We make sure that for the businesses that we support and the different other aspects of my positions in the community, that money funnels back into community, right? So it's going to Copy Spot, it's going to the Postman, it's going to Amy Mercado's, it's going to Delish, right? It's going to Jay Styles, who might come up and do some work with our, with our scholars and whatnot. It goes to after school programs, all of those different things. So We have to buy food, we have to do transportation, all of these different things that have to be done. So this actually is a stimulus for our specific communities when done properly, and when we actually talk about decolonizing budgets, which a lot of folks aren't even thinking about, right? So there are some aspects to some of these charter schools where a lot is actually being stifled in the space. And what we really need to do is we need to stop politicizing charter schools. The majority of scholars who go to charter schools are Black and brown. And so when we politicize them, we actually continue to push systemic oppression. Washington State has one of the strongest laws for charter schools because they've learned from all of the folks who didn't do it right before. So there is a House bill right now that is coming out, and it is the Levy Equalization bill, and it's House Bill 1591. And we need for community to actually reach out to the legislators and actually tell them, like, I need you to vote for this, right? It's getting ready to go on the floor. And why this is so important is because we know that disproportionately 70% of global majority kids are the kids who are in the charter sector. You don't have that at other schools around, right? So when we look at that and we say we're not going to do levy funding, you pay taxes, I pay taxes. If you or my child goes to a charter school, they don't get to see any of that money for those taxes, which means that there's a gap in that funding from $1,500 to $3,000 per scholar. So books that I might need for a scholar, all of those different things, whatever that scholar needs, they're not getting it, right? When we talk about taking care of teachers, we also know that charter schools employ, back to what the Black Lives Movement matter is like hiring teachers. Well, in order to hire teachers, you need to make sure that they have the compensation that they actually need, right? But if our schools that are serving global majority teachers and serving global majority scholars don't have access to those levies, they can't actually do that. And so that's one piece of it. I think also when we dig a little bit deeper and we actually see what schools are not supported by that levy, and knowing that this is an ecosystem that, like, these leaders are actually pushing money back into community, it's charter schools and it's tribal schools. Well, if we know that charter schools are majority, Black and global majority, and we know that tribal schools are indigenous, then who is this levy really actually hurting?
So 1591 will extend the opportunity for charters to participate in this levy or get funding from this?
It will give charters and tribal schools the opportunity to actually have levy funding come to them directly. There was a House bill, and huge shout out to Representative Intamin. She did a bill where she was trying to open up the window for charter schools. And the reason why that's important is that there's only currently 24 charter schools right now, and there is a cap of 40. That window was closed because enough schools weren't necessarily open, like the window ended. That Representative Intamin really tried to push to get that window opened back up. And it was basically like, pushed to the side and like, we don't necessarily need this or whatever. But again, we do need it because we need more community members to be able to go in and open up communities because our schools, because they have the context of what is happening in their backyards.
Yeah, they do. And really, I mean, I'm a proponent of this, but for the Global Majority Consortium, you guys are also making sure people understand this language, because I think a lot of times it goes over people's head because they're not plugged in. And so are you guys also helping to make sure that people are getting connected? And I mean, clearly you're here doing that work, but how are you guys being intentional to make sure people understand this language and they understand the impact that it's going to have?
Yeah, so thankfully, one is like just the grassroots aspect of it, right? Like making sure as we're talking to families, we're letting folks know through community universities where, like we'll hold panels and we'll do different things. We'll make sure that community continues to know. Also leaning on our partners, King County Equity Now, Converge Media, Africatel, making sure that folks understand this information is really important. Another aspect of that is like special education. Special education, we know that Black and Indigenous folks are disproportionately put into those spaces. And, like you need special education services. Washington State has a cap of 13.5%. So if I'm a school leader and I have 22 or 23 or 25%, all those kids past that 13.5% of my population at my school don't receive funding for special education. Wow. Then you don't receive levy funding. You also don't receive facilities funding. So that makes that gap be anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 when we're actually looking at it in a different space. So, and to your point about like, how do we get this information out? I think like as a community, we tend to show up to vote when it comes to people and we don't show up to vote when it actually comes to policies.
Yeah.
And it's really important that, like, yes to the people, but one person cannot change that entire system. We can change that entire system by actually voting on these bills and paying attention to the policies that are being passed, because that's how things get squeaked in. For example, there's a bill right now, House Bill 1807, that is being put forward to stop professional development around anti-racism, meaning educators no longer would have to actually sit through anything that is going to support them. Folks could claim that that would be trauma-informed practices, right, if it has an anti-racist lens or any of those types of things. So when we talk about like how the bills get put in, like, this is really important. We also have a tendency to look at federal bills instead of local bills. Like, federal bills are all fine and dandy, and we need to make sure that we're paying attention to those, but a lot of stuff gets squeaked in with our local policies, and we're not paying attention. So we have to start paying attention to that.
Yeah, this is really key. I mean, those are two serious bills for people to actually be following up on and connecting with their legislators and their state reps on this. This is something that I'm always shocked, because I'm like, who put something like that even forward as a bill for us to have to vote on it or have to get our state reps to push forward to something like that? Particularly when we're talking about a lot of people getting in the streets in 2020 globally, understanding that we really do have a huge issue with oppression and racism in our country, and that it hits everybody locally at every state in a very specific, particular way. And we dealt with that right here in Washington State. That's why people were out in the streets for such a long time. So now we got two bills that you're introducing to our audience, and to me, for us to really stay focused on. What are some of the ways that people can make sure that they are participating if they're saying, wait a minute, charters and tribal schools need that levy funding, and hey, we need to make sure that our professionals actually are trained in racist practices?
Yeah, so reach out to your legislators and let them know that, like, you want to vote no on 1807, and that you want to vote yes on Bill 1591 explicitly. You can also email your legislators for anything. And a lot of times, like, we just don't do it, right? And so if we begin to put the pressure on, then we begin to be able to have the say, right? Like, we begin to be able to, dictate what policy is going to be. And we let folks know, like, we are here and we're not only listening, we're watching, and we're going to hold you accountable. There have been folks who have been able to sit in some of these positions. We need to run for office too, right? Like, we need to run for office. We need to make sure that we're stepping up and saying, like, if not me, then who? So, like, step up and do that work. I think those are some of the things that are really important. Another thing that comes around education and understanding this ecosystem of education is making sure that we do have more Black and Indigenous teachers. And if they're not being educated, they can't go to school to begin to do that work, right? And so those are some of the things that have to begin to happen. Even like when I was listening to y'all talk about Seattle Central and how their numbers are low. Charter schools are now up for Seattle's Promise, which means that after Running Start, you still get another 2 years free of college. You can finish your BA if you go to these schools for free, right? Which then supports our Seattle Central office with being able to make sure our school, college, with being able to make sure that they have folks who are in there. So again, like, this is an ecosystem, but we have to pay attention to how that ecosystem actually works together for the greater good of our communities and pushes money back into our community so that we can, come across like gentrification. It's not necessarily gentrification. What's really happening is colonization, right? They're displacing folks from communities completely. And so in order for us to do that, we have to begin to affect these policies.
Absolutely, Baionne. And thank you so much for bringing it to our attention today. There's a lot going on, and I think these are two things that people need to be focused on and really pushing, again, like you said, our legislators and our policymakers. If folks want to connect with you and the Global Majority Consortium, how do they do that before we let you go?
Yeah, so there are a couple of ways. One, we're on LinkedIn, so they can always access us. And then we also have a website, gmcchange.com. We're actually getting ready to take our inaugural round of educators, folks who want to open up nonprofits, open up private or charter schools, and superintendents, principals, et cetera, through an anti-racist training to actually show them how to do this right well.
Wow. Congratulations to you and your husband. Amazing feat for community. You are a shining star for us. And almost every time I talk to you, I have to hold my emotion back because I'm just like, I mean, we went to school together, and look at you just doing your thing in community. I'm just so thankful. Thank you for being with me today.
Thank you for doing your thing in community. Yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you.
It's a mutual appreciation.
Look. Howard,
Yeah,
Garfield, like
right?
all of that. Like, yeah, this is what we do.
This is community love for sure. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Baionne.
Thank you.